What's up, everybody? So we're going to react to some creepy Pokédex entries. I've heard all about these before, so there might be only a few that surprise me, but we're going to find out. We're going to find out. Oh yeah, let's answer some questions. eBay. Let's be honest.
What's going on, Imperials? It's Emperor Cubone here. One of the core milestones in any Pokemon game is filling out the Pokédex. Whether it's your goal to complete it or not, every time you capture a new creature, you get to learn their type, their category, height and weight, and even a brief description of its characteristics. However, sometimes these accounts might be embellishing a little bit, like claiming that Slurpuff's smell is 100 million times better than humans. Not sure how they could even know that, especially with such a small nose, but let's just assume that all of these blurbs are true at least to some extent. That still leaves a great many Pokemon with seriously disturbing traits, much of which can go unnoticed unless you take the time to read the information. For example, I never knew that Snover apparently grows berries sometimes around their midsection that taste like frozen treats. That would be pretty cool, but they never really show up in its designs, nor can you even find those as items within the game, only being locked away in a Dex entry. But not all of those surprises are so nice, and you don't even have to look all that far. There are the widespread ones that most people already know, like the scary fact that Spoink's heart only beats by it bouncing, which means that it will die if it stops. Or even the fact that Gorbis uses its teeny mouth straw to suck out bodily fluids from its prey. But then again, you would be surprised by how many people still think the South Sea Pokemon is nice and sweet just because it's pink, even when it belies its unsettling vampiric tendencies. But there are many less common tidbits that people aren't aware of, like the fact that most of the crab Pokemon seem to be frequently eaten. The Pokédex entry for Corphish states that its pincers often fall off. Unlike Crabrawler or Clauncher, the meat in its claws is utterly nasty and stinking. So I guess it's actually good news for Corphish, except for, losing its claws all the time, but nobody will be hunting it like the other, more tasty shellfish, because Clauncher's Dex says, the meat of its claws is so delicious. And then in Alola, Crabrawler's says, what little meat they contain is rich and delicious. It can be easy to forget that not only do Pokemon eat each other in a food chain, but all of the people in this world need to eat something too. So unless you're going to be a grass-typetarian, you'll probably go hunting for some juicy crab meat. I mean, I'd play a Pokemon version of Deadliest Catch, but at least Corphish gets a break for not being so appetizing. But there are substantially more unsettling Dex entries around, like Delmise. The Dex says it wraps its prey in green seaweed and sucks away their vitality. And that's disturbing enough, but we pretty well knew that, right? It then goes on to say, it only likes to go after big prey like Wailord. And then another entry says, swinging its massive anchor, it KOs Wailord in a single blow. Are you kidding me? Delmise can instantly knock out the biggest Pokemon in the world? Just imagine what would happen if it decided to go after something smaller, like, a boat that you happen to be on? You would stand no chance of surviving at all. So I guess we're lucky that Delmise is so rare. But then again, it is very alarming that the Seafolk Village has a Wailord-shaped structure with the Sea Creeper Pokemon being so close. And perhaps predictably, there are many ghost types with chilling descriptions, such as the tail end of one of Gengar's Dex entries that simply states, there is no escaping it. Give up. So that's nice and optimistic, thanks there, Dexter. But we knew that Gengar was already a weirdo. I wanted to look at the less appreciated Duskull, whose Dex says, if it finds bad children who won't listen to their parents, it will spirit them away. Or so it is said. So it's nice of them to hedge their bets on the end there, but assuming that it is true, a different entry states, Duskull can pass through any wall no matter how thick it may be. Once this Pokemon chooses a target, it will doggedly pursue the intended victim until the break of dawn. So apparently, Duskull is capable and willing to stalk misbehaving children all night, and nothing will be able to stop it. I mean, there's discipline, and then there's just being cruel. Let's hope that you got some dark types to watch over your kids at night. Now, I don't know many people who love Lickitung, and that may be because the Pokédex says it checks out whatever's around it by licking everything. If you don't clean off the spot where it licked you, you'll break out in a rash. And another Dex entry says that whatever it licks will stink afterwards, so not only will you be covered in slobber and stink, but it clearly does not react well with human skin, causing an adverse reaction. So just don't leave these things around the house because there's no telling what it would do to the furniture. But that's not all, because Sliggoo is actually in a very similar situation. The Pokédex says its entire body is covered in gooey mucus that can dissolve anything. So that's nice, but then a different entry says it has trouble drawing the line between friend and food. It will calmly try to melt and eat even those that it gets along well with. So even if you are super close to this Pokemon and you trust it completely, it might just cover you in corrosive acid anyway because it's a little hungry. So I would recommend finding rain as soon as possible to try and diffuse the looming specter of death that this slug thing represents. But then speaking of specters, we can take a look over at Phantump as well. The Pokédex states, by imitating the voice of a child, it causes people to get hopelessly lost deep in the forest. It's trying to make friends with them. And hey, maybe that's true. But making friends seems to be a charitable interpretation of luring people into the woods with a false voice. You knew what you were doing, because the Pokédex also says that Phantump is created by stumps being possessed by the spirits of children who died while lost in the forest. So sure, you were making Phantump friends by tricking kids into becoming a Phantump, but stories like this do confuse me a bit, when people say that ghost types don't mean that they were actually deceased people, because maybe that's true, but there are times where that clearly is the case. Take Yamask, where the Pokédex says, the spirit of a person from a bygone era became this Pokémon. It rambles through ruins for someone who knows its face. That's the face that it carries around with them, by the way, and then they look at it and they cry. So maybe not all ghosts used to be humans, but some of them certainly were. Which is all the more disturbing when your eternal rest could be stopped by a random 10-year-old who wants to use you for combat. But it's not even just ghost types that have this human connection, since a Kadabra Pokédex entry states, a theory exists that this Pokemon was a young boy who couldn't control their psychic powers, and ended up transformed into this Pokemon. So are all Kadabra somehow little ESP children? If so, what exactly does that mean for Abra? But even if that one's all made up, there are plenty of other descriptions that make Kadabra unsettling, like Kadabra's presence infests televisions and monitors with creepy shadows that bring bad luck. So there is definitely something strange that surrounds these psychic creatures, and I'm not just talking about the lawsuits from magicians. But let's take a step back from the otherworldliness and just look at some good old regular disturbing Dex entries, like the one for Bruxish. This Pokemon is stated to eat the hard spines of Marini, and that it stuns its prey with psychokinesis and then grinds them to mush with its strong teeth. Even Shellder's shell is no match for it. So that sounds pleasant, to be blended up by its sharp fangs, but the end bit is really what caught my attention. So I peeked over at Shellder's own Dex entry, which claims it is encased in a shell that is harder than diamond. Yikes. So if Bruxish can rip through something harder than diamond with relative ease, it's rather unnerving to think about what it might do to your leg if it got a hold of it. One that sounds a little more fun, but isn't, comes from Igglybuff. I was just randomly flipping through and saw its Dex entry say, it has a soft and bouncy body. Once it starts bouncing, it becomes impossible to stop. That is horrifying. It's not a choice like how Scorbunny just likes to hop, it is a physical reality of its biology. Igglybuff's body is elastic, so it's going to bounce off of something eventually, and then it will just continue to do so until the end of time. I'm not even convinced that evolution would stop it, since Jigglypuff is also quite bouncy. So even a Moonstone will likely not free your fairy from its rebounding prison, with the only sweet release being in the cold embrace of death. However, another one that could seem benign is from Metang. This Dex entry says that its body is so tough, even a crash with a jet plane won't leave a scratch. So it's pretty durable, that's cool. But another one states, the claws tipping its arms pack the destructive power to tear through thick iron sheets as if it were silk. So this is sounding a lot less fun for that plane Metang was going to hypothetically crash into, And that wouldn't even be a problem, except that in Ultra Sun, it is outright told to us that Metang flies at high speeds around the skies, meaning that at any point, an unsuspecting aircraft might just get obliterated by a stray iron leg that's rocketing by. I guess we should be lucky that they're so uncommon. Now, one of the Galar Pokemon that may have looked a bit familiar was Hatterene, with many fans drawing comparisons to Gardevoir. But while they do both deal in emotions, Hatterene seems a bit more vindictive. See, the Pokédex states, if you are too loud around this Pokemon, you risk being torn apart by the claws on its tentacle. First of all, it's a bit weird to call it a tentacle, but far more importantly, what exactly does too loud mean? Exactly how many decibels is Hatterene willing to endure before it flies off the handle and starts ripping you to shreds? And what happens if you happen to have a baby in your house? So if you insist on using this alien thing, maybe you should invest in some earplugs so it doesn't maim all of your friends. However, there are plenty of other disturbing Galar Pokédex descriptions, such as Ice-Q. Now, I don't mind this Pokemon, I feel like it gets a little overhated, but it is said that the hair on its head connects to the surface of its brain. When this Pokemon has something on its mind, its hair chills the air around it. That basically means this little penguin has an exposed nerve shooting right out of the top of its head that can't even be covered by its defensive ice cube. So I guess we know the weak point to go for, right? But I really wanted to talk about Orbeetle, or more specifically the Gigantamax form, since those do have their own descriptions. So it states, if it were to utilize every last bit of its power, it could control the minds of every living thing in its vicinity. That might not be that bad, I mean it sounds pretty draining, so I doubt it would do it that often, and besides, how big could its vicinity be anyway? Well, the other version's text says, it emits psychic energy to observe and study what's around it. And what's around it can include things over 6 miles away. That is the most terrifying thing I could imagine. A giant UFO bug comes down and bends every living human, Pokemon, and even plant probably to its will for miles around. And really, when you think about how small the Galar region is, 6 miles could cover a whole lot of territory. If you had one of those in Motostoke, it could easily be able to cover Turffield, Holberry, and even Hammerlock. And if you got like 10 to a dozen people with an Orbeetle and sent them to each and every stadium that allows Gigantamaxing at once, they could probably mind control the entire region. Honestly, that would have been a way better plan for Chairman Rose to try out. Oh hey, and then that would have been a perfect excuse for Team Yell to join your side, because Spikemith doesn't even have a Gigantamaxing stadium. Boy, that would be a great way to tackle a remake one day. Somebody do that. Anyway, the Pokédex is full of weird stories like these, such as Hypno carrying off a child, or maybe Cherubi's second head being delicious and eaten, or the fact that the power of Mega Evolution breaks Glalie jaw, or the unconscionable case of Mandibuzz trying to hunt Cubone. How dare you, you filthy scavenger! And of course, with multiple paragraphs provided each generation, there are literally thousands of dex entries that provide an unsettling view into the secret, creepier side of Pokemon. Which dex entries do you find most disturbing? Let me know down in the comments. Also be sure to leave a like, share this video, and subscribe so that you too can become an Imperial today. And until next time, stay grounded.